patience. Just like I'm sure you've experienced in the struggle to juggle, we are managing some technical difficulties, but I think we're well on our way. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to welcome you to our conversation today. I'm very grateful to be joined today by Dr. Rebecca Pillai-Riddell, who's going to talk about the struggle to juggle, the Working Parents Pandemic Survival Guide. So something that I'm sure that we can all relate to, whether we're parents ourselves or whether we work with parents and caregivers. My name is Mandy Hickman. I work with the Psychology Foundation of Canada as the Manager of Community Programs and Partnerships. And I wanted to share with you now a little bit about who we are with the organization. I'm just going to open up my screen here. Thanks again for your patience. And here we are. This is what we'll be talking about. And the Psychology Foundation of Canada. So who we are, there's Rebecca. Okay, great. We are an organization that has been around for over 45 years, and our mission is to nurture resilience in children and youth. And we do this through the use of psychological science. We've got a number of programs that span the age ranges from birth all the way up to adults. So in birth, we, from 0 to 3 years old, we have a program that's called Make the Connection. And this is where we work with parents and caregivers to help them to develop a healthy and secure attachment with their infants and toddlers. As we move through the ages, we start to work with kids in school, and this is through our Kids Have Stress Too program. This is where we are supporting young people in developing stress management strategies they can take throughout their lives. And onwards into adolescence and teenage years, we also have a program called Stress Lessons. And this is all about supporting young people in managing stress, understanding stress, and being able to do something about it. And onwards into the adult and something that we can all relate to as far as stress strategies. This is an interactive tool where people can go on and develop an action plan to understand and develop some new ideas for managing their stress. So I wanted to take an opportunity now to just get a sense of who's joining us today. So let us know, are you a professional that works with children? Are you a parent? Maybe you're both. This gives us a chance to get a sense of who's in the room, so to speak. I'm also wanting to give a shout out to our friends with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Canada. We've got a number of you joining us today, so thank you so much. We're happy that you're able to join us because you do such amazing work in your worlds with mentors, kids, and parents. So I'll end this poll. And it looks like a lot of you are both parents and professionals that work with children. So that's great. That gives us a sense of how to craft our conversation today. And then one more poll, because I'm always curious about who's joining us as far as across the country. So can you share with us where it is you're joining us from? It's often really interesting to see that we have representation across this vast country, and that's pretty cool. So thanks everybody. I know this is a full house. We actually had sold out on this webinar, and I think that's really indicative of the fact that we all are looking and hungry for this kind of information. So I'll end and share our results. It looks like we've got a lot of people from the central region. So, but welcome to everybody, our friends out in the prairies, West Coast and Atlantic region. Thanks for joining us. So we've got, as I mentioned, these programs, Kids Have Stress Too and Stress Lessons. I would just encourage you to take a look at our website and learn more about these programs if you don't already. We, over the last few months, we're able to bring our training programs online, and now we're offering a number of open call trainings in the next couple of weeks. So if you're a parent, a caregiver, if you're somebody who works with young people in education, in a nonprofit sector as a social worker, psychologist, this is a program that would be interesting for you. So please, I'd encourage you to take a look. And now on to our special guest today. So I'm really pleased that Dr. Rebecca Pillai-Riddell can join us today. She's a registered clinical psychologist and a scientist who uses simple language and humor to help ensure scientific evidence gets into the hands of everyone who can use it. She spends her days as Associate Vice President of Research at York University and is the Director of the Opportunities to Understand Childhood Hurt Lab, or the OUCH Lab, a lab dedicated to better understanding how caregivers influence young children's pain responses in medical settings. And I'm also very happy to report that Dr. Rebecca Pillai-Riddell is a member of our Board of Trustees at the Psychology Foundation of Canada and the chair of our Early Years Committee. So thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining us, and I will turn it on over to you.
Okay, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Can you hear me now?
You're still a little low.
Still a little low, okay. I want to apologize to everybody. There's some craziness going on with my computer today, and so I am unable to turn up the volume, but I will try and speak louder. Does it help if I raise my volume a little bit? I'm hoping, Mandy?
Maybe we could try to raise it all the way up and see if that works.
Okay, so this is me talking as loud as I can without disturbing neighbors, and I hope that, oh, can't really hear. I'm getting that feedback.
However, when you're talking as loud as you can there, that was a lot better. And now we can't hear you at all, Rebecca, unfortunately. No, there's no sound.
Oh, hello?
Yeah, now there's sound.
Is there sound, but not loud?
Yep, but I can hear you.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll really try and speak loud, and I apologize to everybody for the wait. I'm excited to start. So today's talk is entitled The Struggle to Juggle. And I think that before I had children, this is what I kind of felt like, you know, my professional life was. It was pretty complicated. I didn't think I could carry on too much more, lots of balls in the air. And then what ended up happening, and Mandy, you're gonna have to click the next slide, at the next animation. And so what ended up happening is that I started having children. And so I have two children now, a 10 and a 12-year-old. And you see me in that center slide where I feel like I was juggling on a unicycle. And then actually this year hits, and it's the idea of trying to be a professional, taking into account being a mother during a COVID-19 pandemic. And I feel like I'm teetering on the edge a lot of the time. And so as a psychologist, as a researcher, you know, who specializes in parent-child relationships, I find myself really overwhelmed. And so I think one of the things that I've really come to count on is some of the things I've learned actually as a psychologist. And I'm hoping that my experiences as a parent will kind of help us, help you get through some of these really difficult challenges. And so, I'm sorry, I'm just noticing that the sound, I'm going to try once again to try something different. Is that sound better? Yes. Oh.
Yes, that's a lot better. That's
Is it
great.
a lot better?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm okay. So next slide. And I think that's Mandy. So one of the reasons for the overwhelm, I believe, is that we're really actually being asked to make the impossible possible. For those of us, the spring was not so far away that we can't remember all the news coming in, the pandemic coverage, the fear. Some of us may have lost our jobs or had different job adjustments that were happening. And then on top of all of that chaos, we were asked to hold our jobs plus, because a lot of us had a lot, everything in the pandemic becomes more complicated. And so regular responsibilities took that much longer. And then our children, for that entire spring, were home with us, working at home and without proper teaching if you were in the public school systems or engagement. And so even getting groceries into our house, this added pandemic life responsibilities were really complicated. And one of the things that was coming out very clearly in the research was that women, and I'm sure there's men out there as well, but when it was coming into these households, women ended up stepping in forward and stepping up more to take on the additional caregiving and pandemic responsibilities, like getting groceries, bringing them in the house, and disinfecting, and all the crazy things that we have to do now. And so that the feeling is that women may be paying a higher career price to keep families afloat right now.
And so part of this talk is definitely trying to gear that. Next slide. And so what I'm hoping to do is introduce a few concepts. So as a therapist, it takes me 8 to 10 weeks. We go through this, and I have a lunch hour and even less because of the technical difficulty. But I want to take you through a few different principles and concepts that I really think are critical, bang for your buck pieces of knowledge. Next slide. So there are real stressors going on. And so nothing I say is going to take away the fact that there are real stressors happening. And I like this picture because the mom is freaking out, but when you look at the kids, they seem pretty calm. They're probably watching Paw Patrol or something. They seem pretty engaged. They look very cherub-like, like their white shirts make me laugh because I'm like, how long do our kids in white stay white? But the truth of the matter is that when we add stress onto anything that we do, it makes things more difficult. And slide. And so this is, a really well-known curve. And really what it shows is that the higher aroused we are, or the higher stressed we are, when we're doing simple tasks, so folding laundry, for example, or if we're at work, deleting just the junk emails that come through, we actually do better. We have a stronger performance when we have a simple task. But when you put us under stress, and this is any human being, research has shown for almost 100 years now, that the more difficult the task, the harder it is to get something done in high stress. However, at a moderate level of stress or arousal, we can actually do our peak performance. So when we think about difficult tasks, basically getting anything involving getting our children to do anything can really be a difficult task. And slide. Oh, yes, and there was a little star there, but that was just really the idea. Sorry, I was supposed to be moving our slides, but due to technical difficulties, we'll get through. So we have this real stress that's happening, and I want to acknowledge that before we really talk about how we can address it and make things better. But I want to, acknowledge that there are real stressors, there are real impacts of stressors, and real barriers that we have to face. And as parents, you'll see to the left side of your screen that we have Maslow's hierarchy. And what that shows is just basically to be this wonderful self-actualized human being ourselves, we really have to make sure we have enough food, we feel safe, we feel loved, we have self-esteem, and then we can get to the pinnacle of this triangle. But as parents, we actually have to worry about that for our children as well. And so the younger your child, or the more needs your child has, in the pandemic, the less you can actually do. Especially if you're someone who has your children at home, you may not have access to daycare, you may not have access to schools because you're in a high-risk household. So for different reasons, that your children, the responsibilities to keep them fed, it becomes harder. To keep them safe becomes harder. And so we have these stressors that are, interfering with our ability to develop our children in the way we want to, or develop ourselves. And when you think about the traditional definition of what a stressor is, definitions often include that it's new, that you can't predict it, that you can't control it. And when you think about that, that's exactly what the pandemic has done to us. It's literally in the name, the novel COVID-19 coronavirus, right? This novel coronavirus. And so it's the very definition of our pandemic. So in the context of these real stresses, these real barriers, what can we do? Next slide. So we can get overwhelmed. And our cups runneth over. One of the things I often use in therapy with my patients is the analogy of the cup. And we all have our cup, and I call it our coping cup, because when that cup gets too full and overflows, we really can't function at all, or we don't function well. And so everybody's cup has something already in it. Nobody has an empty cup. So whether that's having children with high needs, whether it's marital challenges, health challenges, work stressors, our cup always has something in it. And so with the pandemic, with this uncontrollable, novel news feed where everybody, is scared, or people aren't scared enough, that's stressful as well, you can really find that our cup runneth over. And so that all of these stressors start filling up our coping cup so that we're actually in a situation where we're not functioning optimally as parents or even as people. Next slide. So what's really important and this is kind of the key here, is that you can't control the stressors, but you can control your stress. And my goal for my own life, whose cup has definitely runneth over many times over the past, since March, when the pandemic hit and job and family responsibilities took over, you really have to work on doing things to just empty that, kind of empty the cup a little more. You'll never have an empty cup, but the idea is to really, in this stage of high stress, high risk parenting, that we try and empty the cup as much as we can and use strategies that can help us change what our perceptions of the stressors are, not necessarily the stressor themselves. Next slide. So I'm going to introduce a really core fundamental aspect of cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's the idea that our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors impact each other. And so it's really easy to think about that some of your thoughts impact how you feel, and how you feel impacts how you act, and that triangle can go in any direction. And so what we do often as therapists, and sometimes we'll work on the behavior first, it depends on the patient before us, but a really handy way to work forward or work through things when you're feeling overwhelmed is to really focus on your thoughts and start at that top of that triangle, to think about thoughts and your feelings and your behavior. So one click from Andy. So there are different types of thoughts. We call them cognitive distortions or cognitive tangles. And so in therapy, what we would do is kind of identify these different thoughts that you have so that you can untangle them. A really common one is something called an all or nothing thought. And so that's where you see things in black and white, and you just can't get past it. So you have a thought, and this is one of my recent thoughts over the summer. So I have children at home with no day camps, no daycare during a pandemic, and therefore I cannot make any research progress. Next click. So feeling that I can't do anything for my work, I feel depressed, stressed, guilty, angry, all leading to low energy and feeling that I have low self-esteem and self-efficacy. So all that stuff we were talking about on that triangle to make us feel better is really this idea that we can actually work our way up on that triangle. And so when I have a thought, an all or nothing thought, like I can't do anything, I just come right back down. And so what does that cause me to do? Next click. I lay on the couch, eat junk food that feels oh so good, and binge on Netflix. So I have been, very guilty of this type of behavior. It's kind of hit me at times where I just don't have the motivation to do anything. I have lots to do, but it's almost that I just have no energy, and it's that feelings of overwhelm. And so when you actually can take a moment in your day to think about what some of these thoughts that kind of cripple you, that cause you to feel guilty, tired, lethargic, which then cause these behaviors, which guess what? Reinforce the thought that I'm not going to make any research progress because I just can't turn off the Netflix. I can't do, I can't stop eating the junk food, which isn't healthy for me. And so all of the cycle starts again. So we try it again with a different type of thought. Click. And click again. So I do have young children at home. Nothing's going to change that. I have no daycare. It's a pandemic. So therefore, I have to accept a smaller number of have-to-dos. So rather than seeing my problem that I could do no work, and for me, that happens to be research and research administration, that I can't do anything, I have to accept that in the context of these real stressors, these real barriers that the entire world is feeling, that I have to accept that I'm only going to have a smaller number of things I have to do. And constantly during the pandemic, I have found that I'm redefining what I have to do. So whether it's how much cleaning I have to do, whether it's, how much detail or how much time I can invest on a certain thing at work, I have to redefine that. Because in this pandemic, again, in the context of real barriers and real stressors, I have to accept that I can only do, I can do less. And what do those feelings lead to? What does that lead to? I feel less stressed, and all of a sudden I have a bit more energy. Because rather than attacking the whole problem of research or research productivity, I've now started breaking things down in my mind and thinking, okay, wait, I just have to give up on that. I have to let that go. And then my behavior changes. I take big tasks and I break them down into smaller tasks and I can do them. So a key example of something that I would do in terms of research is that, as associate vice president, I get probably 100, 150 emails a day that I'm trying to, some of them I can delete easily, some not so much. And so if I keep the big task as I need to respond to all of my email, which will probably take, and it's taken me, 6 to 8 hours when I've tried to do it that way, I'm not going to have that 6 to 8 hours, or it's going to take a while to get to those 6 to 8 hours, which causes me to get further and further behind, which again starts that thought, feeling, behavior cycle. Instead, I say, you know what? I'm going to answer these emails, and I set some sort of limit, or I'm going to answer email for an hour today. And I dedicate that time, I create a smaller task, and I do them. And so what that does is then it makes me feel more competent. It makes me think that I have greater self-efficacy, and it encourages better behavior. Next slide. And one more. It's really important not to aim, and I hope you can see another one of my coping mechanisms that I'm not endorsing, but obviously a glass of wine has definitely helped, and I'm a Prosecco girl, so I definitely wanted to have that represented here, is that the goal isn't to actually keep your cup empty, right? That you're going to have no stressors. I think it's getting used to that we're going to have stressors. Life is always going to have stressors, but actually keeping room in our cup. And so trying to do things piece by piece, rather than big problems, breaking them down into small problems to focus on what you can do. Next slide. So I wanted to give some tips that I, as a parent, trying to struggle to juggle, am doing right now and have been doing since March, and it's an evolving thing to help keep harnessing my psychological strength for parenting. So I had to recognize that, and so I'm in Zoom meetings all day, that my kids' lower level needs had to come first. So going back to that triangle, no matter what, I need to keep them safe. So, they can't go outside, without me watching them. I need to think about the food and healthy foods. And they sometimes needed a snuggle. So that meant that whenever possible, and they stand at the door, and I have this gesture, you can see it here, I do this, but that gesture is actually, I do it outside of the camera like this. And when they see that, they're not allowed to come in. But when I hear that door, I've learned to kind of split my attention, is that sometimes in some meetings, it's okay for my kid to come in for a snuggle. And they've been isolated from their friends. Things are hard, their family as well. And so that idea that I'm going to kind of change my normal way, it's not professional, I get that. There was a tweet on Twitter about, the etiquette of, Zoom meetings and making sure your children aren't there and that's just not my reality. And so that's okay for me. And I really try and encourage that in the people I work with, so that we can all kind of forgive each other a little more. One of the other things that I found is that, shockingly, kids left unattended, and I have 10, 12-year-olds, so they're older, definitely. They were not making the healthiest choices for their lunch. And so not only were they not making the healthiest choices, and the cookies seemed to go so well, but any sort of food that we had leftovers or things that they could eat were not. And so what I found is that it was just calmer for all of us to pack a lunch every morning. So we're all at home right now, but we pack our lunch. And when I come back out of, I come out of my office to see what's been happening. And now they do have teaching, and they've just got their teachers this week. So it's been quite a wait. But, now when I come out, my kitchen isn't a disaster either, which actually adds a lot of stress to me, is that when I come out after a really hard day and then see that all these dishes. And so packing a lunch, even though we're staying home, helps me ensure that I know what they're eating, and they're not allowed, that's kind of the rule, not to eat outside of their lunch until dinner time. And it helps contain the mess. I have to prioritize aspects of my kids' progress. So, I think with all of us, we're a generation of parents that schedule our children to do a lot of after-school activities. We want them to be enriched or optimized, all of that wonderful stuff. And sometimes we definitely go too far. I think that's a whole different talk for the Psychology Foundation of Canada. But I really had to learn, and I'm still learning, because I feel like I'm letting go. And so I have to prioritize certain aspects. And so in my life, my children did not start full-time school. They're in a public school in Toronto, a Catholic school in Toronto. And so our schooling didn't fully start until Monday. And so that's a long time that they've been out of school. And so I had to prioritize something. So if I wanted them to get a full education every day, it wasn't going to happen. And so getting stressed over that, which I did, I don't want to pretend that this was just an easy transition for me, is that I just kind of focused on French. And so it was something, there was a program that I could afford that was being run that we had done summer camps through, and they were actually offering classes and continued to. So for me, it was, you know, I thought about what's the hardest thing for them to catch up after the pandemic, because, you know, there will be a time post-pandemic, and I thought French is the thing I'm going to focus on. And so it's, again, taking that big problem of, literally, I felt like my kids were not being educated because they weren't being educated, and then kind of prioritizing aspects. And so, you know, I got them help or got them these programs in French where they could kind of interact with other kids online. And it really was a lifesaver for us getting through, because it was at least something that was anchored to their day. Another thing is forgiveness. So I've brought this up, and acceptance. And this is the hardest one for me. And so I'm struggling. I don't want to pretend again that I have this all figured out. But when things fall through the cracks, and they will, I have to forgive myself and kind of accept. And it goes back to that initial thing, is that you can only do what you can do. And so if I keep myself less stressed, I am going to have energy, and I am going to accomplish more than if I hold unrealistic standards for myself, feel stressed and tired, and then end up in Netflix in a complete binge. Therapy. So for me, I actually have started supportive therapy, CBT therapy myself. So it really is this idea, all of us are caregivers, but someone has to caregive for us as well. We need to be taken care of. And so it's really an important part of my life that I can download on someone that I'm not responsible for. So I am one, you know, I think many of us will feel we're part of network, but you can't sometimes really download because for fear that your emotions or your upset or your overwhelm will make the other person overwhelmed. And so, you know, working with someone who maybe is in your life that you can, it could be a therapist, it could be someone, a religious person, there are counselors, different levels of counselors out there, and even telephone hotlines and things that are out there. But being able to download and kind of empties my cup. And I feel that's a really important part as I juggle so much. And the idea of asking more of my kids. So it's kind of actually flipping the narrative a little bit, right? And so, you know, I'm worried about all the things I'm not doing for the kids or that are not happening. I'm trying to do my work. I don't have enough time. And, you know, at my kids' age, 10 and 12, I actually got them to start pitching in the house in a way I never thought I would, but they're better for it. So again, there's research to show that kids who do chores and housework regularly grow up to be more successful people, and I think more considerate people. And so this idea of getting them to do regular housework, so we always used to do a little housework, but they're actually taking, I'm spending the time, I'm training them to do almost everything in the house. And so I'm finding that having 2 extra helpers is really helping. And when you have younger kids, obviously, you know, the under 5 set, you're not going to get so much help there. But even, you know, a 5-year-old can start learning to take dishes from the table, or even collecting silverware or cutlery, and you build up. And what that does is not only do I think it's teaching your children a really important life lesson, because I think when you clean, you think about who has to clean up after yourself, and you just become that more considerate person. But also, I think that it buys up time for my schedule. So it's less that I have to do. And I am one of those people, when I walk through my house and things are in disarray, it just brings me down. And so even asking them that it's their job to make sure all the dishes are in the dishwasher, or even to get all the clothes or something in a pile. And so young kids can put things in a pile. They may not be able to put away the laundry. They may not be able to do this, but gathering things up in a pile can make it easier for you to do things. And then just waiting for our lunch date. So I've really worked hard with the people at my work to have my lunches free. And it doesn't always work, so it can't be a 100% thing. But my kids know that during the day, that there's a moment in my day that I'm going to be coming out to talk to them. And so I feel that helps with their disruptions and their needs to interrupt my meetings for snuggles and things like that. So I feel that, you know, having a moment every day where I can actually just say, this is our time to talk. This is your time to, if you need something, or multiple times, because depending on your life situation, it would be it's really helpful for them. Next slide. And so I'm seeing that the questions, but what I'll do is that I think we'll have plenty of time for questions. So I'll address them all at the end, just a note about that. So one of the things as well, in terms of keeping my cup less full, so not empty, but keeping my coping cup less full, is a mantra that I really started for myself about my own mess, and kind of minding and taking care of my own mess. So for me to be, close to functioning at the level that I need to be with so many demands, I really have to make sure that I'm moving, I'm eating somewhat right, I'm sleeping, and I'm reducing my stress. And so if you think about those 4 things every day, just for yourself, it's 4 letters, and think about doing something for yourself and minding your own daily mess. I think that also is something just broader that will help keep your coping cup a little less empty. So in my life, whenever I can do a meeting that I'm just talking to someone in my house, I walk around. So I turn off the camera and I walk and talk. In my house, just walking, or just even standing up. I have a chronic pain condition, and so I have to have a limited diet. I make sure I stick close to that, because the minute I deviate on that, I feel pain, and it lowers my functioning. I like junk food. I wish I didn't. And to restrict myself every day is just not something I can do. The pandemic means that I need my treats at the end of the day, so I make room for it. And I think the idea is that I have these certain treats that I'm allowed to eat, and I make sure I have 1 or 2 of them every day. And it's in front of the TV. And yes, I'm in front of Netflix or Disney Plus, depending on what the kids are saying. But it's a part of my routine that, while it's not great for me, I'm not overdoing it. And by not restricting myself, I find it easier not to overboard. Although, again, at times that happens. Ordering fruits and vegetables I like, due to the ease of online ordering. So I think this is the other thing, is that I've done a lot of online grocery ordering. And so, it gives you that opportunity to kind of look at all the fruits and vegetables you could choose, and kind of pick, different choices, and adding something new just to get something healthy. Sleep. So I am someone who doesn't need a lot of sleep, but if I don't get my, for me, it's 6.5 hours, I am not good. And so I'm not so worried about a wake-up alarm. I'm actually more worried about a bedtime alarm. And so the idea of making sure that no matter what, setting some sort of alarm, or whether it's saying it to your family, like, we have to be under the covers at this time, and doing that. I think banning screens in the bedroom is often an important thing. There's a whole, psychologists do a whole thing on sleep hygiene. And oftentimes having screens in the bedroom reduces the time you are actually asleep in bed. Doesn't reduce the time you're in bed, but it reduces the time you're asleep. And if I could just have one click, there's just a funny picture. It's the mummy. And when I was kind of looking at it, and it's a mum who is exhausted beyond sleep, but stays up late anyhow, since it's her only opportunity for kid-free time. And so I completely recognize that need. I have it. The idea that I stay up till late after the kids go to bed, when I should be going to bed on weekends, it really is this need. I just need to be awake and have no one need me. And so I think many people, it's a thing. It's obviously a meme now, so it's a real thing out there. But thinking about how you can do that in other ways. So if it's kind of setting a couple shows, or maybe, a movie, so that you're not going on and on late and later into the night. And then stress, like for me, I started seeing someone online. I have a CBT therapist, which was amazing. So the idea in regular life, pre-pandemic, this wasn't as commonly done. And so the idea of taking an hour to drive somewhere, see a therapist for an hour, another hour back, was just not feasible for me. And so the idea that you can actually, the online therapy, particularly, I know the Ontario situation has flipped over really well for PHIPAA compliance, and making sure that personal health information is being transmitted in safe and compliant ways. So this is a really good thing. I try and count my pandemic positives. Like I really have to recognize that I'm grateful I have Wi-Fi, I have a house, my kids are with me. We have the privilege of staying at home. I can work from home, I have a job. So I try and remind myself of some of those things when I get overwhelmed and it seems like everything is going away. Shutting down, I think, is important for stress. So where you don't have to accomplish anything, and whether it's every day, every week, every month, trying to find ways to shut down where you're just getting to do what you want to do and owing nobody anything. And then again, for me, friend time, I find that stress reducing. So popping a glass of bubbly, sitting in front of the screen with my friends. I think it's much easier actually for us to get together, again, in the pandemic, to set up a Zoom call and doing that. Next slide. And next slide. So a lot of tips, more detailed tips, just for pandemic parenting. I think the World Health Organization really did a great service. They surveyed a lot of mental health professionals and child rearing professionals, actually, and put together this set of pandemic parenting. And so all of these are different slides about managing life and parenting in the specific context of the pandemic. And so if you go, there are all these links here, but if you just Google pandemic parenting WHO, you'll be great. You should be able to find these really handy tip sheets that go into a lot more detail than I could over our lunch hour. And next slide. So I hope nothing in my talk would make you think that I do not see, or that it's just in your mind that these pandemic stressors are around. They're very, very real. And the stress you experience, but the stress you experience can be controlled. So we can't de-pandemic your life, but you do have the power to change how the pandemic makes you think, act, and feel about your life. Acceptance is going to be key, and better parenting will follow. And the final note I want to leave you with, and it just needs a slide, is to breathe. So I think that the best thing, the easiest thing that someone can do when stressed and overwhelmed is to take a few deep breaths. And taking that 1, 2, 3 in, and 1, 2, 3, 4 out. One or two, a couple of those breaths, not too many, you'll hyperventilate. But you'll be surprised how it really helps you get a grip at times when the grip seems to be slipping out of your hands. So thank you very much. That's kind of the formal piece. And I think I can, if we go one more down, that's it. And I can deal with some, kind of ask some of these questions. If you have, I can see the chat. So I'm seeing a lot of good, the volume is better now again. So that's great. Is it possible to get the slides? So if I understand, Mandy, these get posted on the website?
Yeah, so everyone's going to get a copy of the recording and a PDF version of your PowerPoint presentation. And so we'd encourage you to share your recording, at least with your network, so that we can ensure that this great information is shared widely.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the first question. And it says, when you do so little, don't you find you yourself can never catch up? And so I think the question to ask yourself is, catch up to what? And so we set these expectations, and one of the things I always joke about is, you don't want to should all over yourself. What you should be doing, should, right? And so when you're thinking about, catching up, what are you trying to catch? And so if you keep asking yourself, like, why do I need to do that? Why do I need to do that? There's going to be a stage where you don't have to do it. I promise that you will get to that stage. Doing so little, I definitely have those feelings of not doing enough, right? When you feel that life takes such a toll. But it really is about getting back to that forgiveness and acceptance. When it takes, 2 to 3 times as long to do a grocery shop, a regular grocery shop. When your children are scared to touch or go, you watch how children are learning to interact. And they're not even allowed to go out, really. Right now, Thanksgiving, right? We're not supposed to be, we're really recommended not to get into indoor social gatherings without anyone outside of our household. So these are on that Maslowian triangle about food and safety, right? Safety is right there. And so if you can't meet those needs, trying to accomplish other things on the top are not going to are going to fall apart ultimately. And so if you have to do what it takes to feel, fed, have those basic survival needs, and to feel safe. And in a pandemic, that takes longer. And so I just encourage acceptance. I encourage patience with yourself, and really questioning what needs to be done. So you're not shooting all over yourself saying, I should be doing this, I should be doing this, and recognize that the world is with you. I find that all the deadlines that I have at work have been moved. I'm trying to think of very few things are on schedule, because we could, I think as a university, it's a constantly changing environment. And so we have to prioritize the health and safety of our faculty, staff, and students. And so we have to pivot on a dime. And living that life for so long has really given me better ability to kind of let things go and really make sure that those basic needs are met before I start thinking about, what I should be doing.
Rebecca, I just have a follow-up question. I've got a couple of others that I thought that I would help you out with. So just going along the lines of acceptance. So there's one aspect of being able, you can only do what you can do. And certainly that resonated with me. But how do you encourage the people in your life, your partner or your children, to also take up that kind of attitude? So if you're not alone in your home, you've got others that are relying on you, and your lives are interwoven. And if you take that approach of, I can only do what I can do, but others don't, do you have some advice for how to manage that and negotiate that?
Yeah, like you're hitting on two different levels, right? So there's the parent-child relationship, and then you're talking about the partner-child, partner relationship. And so I think we have to kind of separate those two first of all, right? So partner to partner, I think there has to be, dialogue about that, about what you can and cannot do, and perhaps, again, depending on how your household works, what they need to step up and do, or what, they may be having that conversation with you. But the idea that it takes more time to live in a pandemic. It takes more time. And just getting through day by day, it takes more energy. So blocking out, trying to promote this talk on Twitter, for example, trying to look in the Psychology Foundation and in my Twitter feed, I'm going through comment after comment after comment about Trump's getting COVID and all the things that are going on. Just even blocking it out, even, whatever I'm doing, not reading them, they're getting in there, and that takes energy. We have to accept that. And so when we have to do less, helping other people to pick up the slack, that's one definite way. And so with the partner-to-partner relationship, right? So asking them, being clear about what you need. And sometimes you need to just take a step back to figure out what you need, right? So this idea of, this is my life. These are the key priorities, right? Keeping my children safe. Like that was when I was talking about, how I was harnessing my psychological strength. Like ultimately, I have to keep my kids safe. Like I have to keep my family safe. Like that was it. So if it takes 2 hours to wait in line to get grocery, like we have to feed them. We have to do that. We have to try and find different ways. If I'm paying more, on Instacart for Costco, it's way more, Some weeks it's worth it. And so it's not just about going partner to partner but trying to find more efficient ways that perhaps I wouldn't have done in any other way. With children, I think that we have to recognize that resilience is also built through adversity. And so this is a really hard time, but it's also a learning opportunity. So I think that understanding that, no, they can't have this right away, and no, they can't have your attention right away because other things are coming into play. It's not what kids want to hear, but sometimes, this idea that we can structure the adversity to be something to teach them resilience, to teach them patience, to help them focus. It is a scary world out there. So I think ultimately in most parent-child relationships, even young children will want to make parents happy and make the home work well. And so while you don't want to get into a kind of a dynamic where they feel they have to take care of you, because that's always very disorganizing for a child, getting them to think about, well, if you do this, we can go for a walk instead of mommy cleaning. So it's not about necessarily just making me feel better, because that can be a slippery slope, but it is about, well, we can do more fun things together. Because, you know, I'd rather go for a walk with my kids than sweep the floor, and they can sweep the floor. You know, it may not be as well. Like I joked over the summer, I made them each do an hour of cleaning every day. And if I had to do it, their 10 hours of cleaning, I could have done probably in 2. But the thing is, and better, you know, 10 and 12, and better. But I had to let go of that, you know, my standards, and they are getting better over time. And I don't have 2 hours to give to it. So I think this idea of like parent to parent and child to child, each parent to child is a bit different.
Yeah. Okay, great. That's helpful. Thanks. We also have another question related to just how much, so being able to only manage what you can manage, how do you catch up then? So if you've now reallocated your time, Rebecca, do you have any strategies as far as ensuring that you're not falling behind, given your busy schedule and given the busy schedule that I'm sure our communities also have?
I'm going to say no. No. Sometimes we're not going to be able to catch up. We're not talking about a short-term stressor. That's why the idea of pandemic parenting it's really different, right? Even when SARS came in, I think it was 2003, that was like a few weeks, you know, a month and a half, something like that, of, you know, of something to face. We're heading in from March, and we don't know when it's going to end, right? We don't know by the time that comes. And so if we're really focused on just catching up on all the things and keeping track of all the things we have to catch up on, I think that's going to be very overwhelming. Yeah, that's my personal, you know, approach would not be that I'm always going to be able to catch up. I'm going to be accomplishing less because I need to spend much more energy at that bottom of that triangle, right? Just, you know, being able to wake up and be in a good mood, that takes regulating of a lot of stress that I have no control over. And so I have to find my ways. And so this may not be the year that I work towards, you know, that big research project that I wanted to do, or that big, you know, project for the university that I wanted to do, but I'm working on it. And I'm trying to get away from the idea that I'm falling behind and readjusting. And so there are priorities that have to be done. You know, you can't just give up on work, but trying to think about easier ways to do things, less involved ways to do things, I think is really important. And again, I'll just come back to that forgiveness and acceptance, is that we are living in a pandemic. Everything takes more time. How could you be expected? Like if a friend came to you, and that's one of the things I do in therapy, right? You know, I try and pose it like if a friend came to you and said, so I have a new responsibility that could take up to 10, 15 hours a week, but I need to accomplish this and that much more, and I get no extra time to do it. What would you say to your friend? Right? It's not a realistic expectation. It's hard for us to say that to ourselves.
Right.
But I really think it is that idea of trying to really reevaluate that catching up, because and I think the other piece of it is also getting used to not being caught up. So my tolerance for my email, I always used to say, like in my life context, when I have less than 50 emails, that was like I was doing well in my inbox. And so now week after week, I'll tolerate much more than that, because I just can't get to it. There are emergency meetings that come up. There are things. It's not that I'm not working. I'm doing my best, but pandemic responsibilities are pandemic responsibilities. And so I apologize and ask people, and it's always going to be that balancing act. But I think forgiveness, being able to tolerate not being caught up, and then questioning, does that really need to stay on something on your list?
Okay. We had another question from just ahead of the presentation from a parent who was asking, how do I give my child attention when I'm exhausted from work?
Yeah. So I had gotten that one, and it's definitely, I know the feeling. So I wake up early. Full disclosure, I'm a 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. person to kind of, I spend my days at York being AVP, but I have this whole scientist role that I squeeze in early mornings. And so, but what that means is that 6 o'clock, I'm dead. I'm brain dead. And so I think it's really about the needs that you have, your child has, and what they are. And so there's, the need for attention, there's a need for food, and there's actually, and for many children who have homework, there's a need to do homework. And so trying to figure out with those things, and maybe there are more, I'm just kind of using it from those three, you're going to be tired at the end of the day. I just think that's going to be the reality. Minding your mess, so the moving, the eating, the sleeping, and the stress are going to help give you your optimal amount of energy. And even if you're not able to manage all 4 of those letters every day, attacking a few of them, just a few of them, even one of them, the moving, the eating, something, one of the 4, that's going to help with your energy reserve. But even with optimal energy, I feel you're going to be exhausted at the end of the workday. And so trying to figure out ways where you can kind of take energy or borrow energy from a different way. And so one of the things I've done is that I have a student that I actually pay. It's not as much as tutors can be like $50 and things like that an hour, but who helps me with their homework. I just found that at the end of the day, I was not a nice person when I'm fighting them to do their homework. And they are so much nicer to the person the student that we have that's helping us, than they ever are to me. And so it was just one of those things, is that, eating with them and giving them attention, and for sure binging in front of the TV. These are all wonderful things that I can do. And it's all I can kind of do brain-wise. Like for me, I'm an hour 15 by that point when they have those high needs. And so it was just trying to find a way, and maybe you spend time on cooking prep and trying to find those ready meals, or going, again, different grocery stores have pre-prepared foods, and a few days a week, they're not the most nutritious. You have to sometimes check the sodium levels. I get that, but we're in a pandemic. And I feel that, getting some prepared foods, fresh prepared foods, may actually give you some more freedom to use the limited energy reserves you have to have more quality time in the evenings with your kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Great. And maybe we've got time for one more question. Do you see one there? That you'd like to
looking for children with anxiety. Mm-hmm. How can we reassure them when there's so many unknowns? Yes. Okay. So that's a big one. I feel like my eyes full on that. And actually something I've been working with the Psychology Foundation of Canada about, thinking about putting together a program for children dealing with pandemic anxiety. So this is a very real thing, right? And so it is a very challenging situation. And there are strategies that we use for patients who have anxiety. So I am a child psychologist. I'm registered to treat children and adults. I couldn't choose. And so I really find that if we're talking about children and anxiety, we need to use reassurance carefully. So reassurance is when you kind of say, it's okay, don't worry, it's going to be fine. When we use that too liberally, it actually can incite more anxiety in a child, right? And so when you address it more fully and help them challenge the cognition, so this is that thought. So even with kids, that triangle still comes into play, and helping them think about, what are they worried about, and helping them think through. With kids, we often use the analogy of a detective, right? You're a detective trying to figure out how to make this work. And so with young children, when they say, I'm really worried about COVID, and you want to break it down into a smaller thought. So it's these same concepts, but what about COVID is making you worried? Well, I'm worried I'm going to get sick. And then, being able to give them something active to do, to say, well, these are the things that, Teresa Tam is telling us to do, right? You want to wear a mask and wash your hands. And when we're doing those things, we have a really great chance of not catching COVID. Mm-hmm. And so when you're doing everything you can do, you don't need to worry. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. And so I think for a child, that's the older the child, I'm kind of taking it at the younger end, because I think it's easier to bring it up than bring it down. But when you're doing everything you can, there's no need to worry, because you don't gain anything. There's no energy, there's nothing to gain by worrying. There never usually is, but I think that the idea of trying to give them things that they can control is an important strategy.
Right. Yeah, and I also would reiterate that point that it really takes that developmental perspective. And I'd encourage people to again take a look at our programs at the Psychology Foundation of Canada. Kids Have Stress Too and Stress Lessons, where we provide a lot of those kinds of strategies to help to support kids depending on where they are age-wise, to break things down into manageable chunks. We recognize that we might not be able to change and control these large-scale stressors, but what can we do on a smaller scale today? So I did want to take this opportunity. I recognize we've got some more questions, but we'll do our very best to get to people perhaps following the webinar. But I wanted to respect everyone's time and respect that Dr. Pillay-Riddell, that you've been here with us. You've shared so much information, and it's really been a personal account as well, and I really appreciate that. And I certainly will be looking at minding my mess. That's to take away. And I think one of the questions was, how do I support parents that I work with? Well, I love this acronym. So I wonder if this is just, it's as simple as providing this kind of framework for people to start to consider their world a little bit differently. So thank you very much for joining us today. And on behalf of everybody with PFC, I wanted to thank the community for joining us. And we look forward to carrying on with this conversation. I wish everybody all the best as we manage through these transitions.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much. And I apologize for the technical challenges.
And that's a part of it too, right? We managed through.
we got through. We got through the stress.
Great. Thank you very much. Have a great day.